Hey guys, all right, so this is my fourth lecture that I've done today, so hopefully I can get through this one. Okay, this is part B of the chemistry talk. Let me get my pen. Okay. All right, so when we talk about chemistry, we want to divide it into inorganic and organic chemistry. Inorganic compounds are things like waters, salts, acids, and bases, and they don't contain carbon except for carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide, and those are both gases. Organic compounds are things like carbohydrates or sugars, fats, which we call lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids, things like DNA and RNA. They always contain carbon, and they're usually very large. Water, the first inorganic compound I'm going to talk about, 60 to 80% of living cells are water, and it's your most important inorganic compound. It's you have to have it for life, and the reason, it has some very unique properties that make it perfect for life. One thing, it absorbs and releases heat very slowly, so that prevents sudden changes in temperature. For example, since I'm mostly water, 80% water, my temperature is 98.6. If I walk outside on a 105-degree day, my body temperature won't rise immediately. It takes a while for my body temperature to rise. Same thing, if I go outside and it's 100 degrees below zero, it'll take a while for my body to chill down because water holds onto heat. It takes a long time for it to heat up and to cool down. It's also great as a cooling mechanism. Think about when you sweat, the water evaporates off and it cools you down. It's a great solvent. Things dissolve well in water. We use it to transport things. Think blood. Blood is mostly water. All of our chemical reactions work best in a water-based environment. It cushions our organs. So we have fluid around all our organs, those serous membranes. That serous fluid, mostly water, acts as a cushion. And it also plays a role in fluid and electrolyte balance. Electrolytes are basically your salts like sodium and chloride, and those dissolve in water, and we can keep our salt balance regulated using water. If you think about going outside and getting hot and getting sweaty, and you sweat, and your sweat's salty, you're losing salts. So to get those salts back, you usually crave something salty. So a lot of times you'll want to drink a Gatorade instead of water to get your electrolytes back. And so water and electrolytes always go hand in hand. Speaking of electrolytes, those are your salts, and these are ionic compounds that will break down in water. Salts don't have hydrogen ions or hydroxyl ions. They have anything but that. For example, sodium chloride, potassium chloride, calcium carbonate, and calcium phosphate. These ions are also known as electrolytes, and they have charge, and they will allow you to conduct electrical currents. So these charged electrolytes like sodium and potassium and chloride, sodium and potassium positive, chloride's negative, as those ions or elements or ions move across membranes, they actually generate a charge, and we use that in nervous conduction. We use calcium carbonate and calcium phosphate salts in our bones and teeth, and we use these sodium and potassium chloride ions as our electrolytes, our salts, like when you sweat. We also have acids and bases. Acids basically are proton donors, which means they release a hydrogen ion in solution. Bases are proton acceptors, which means they accept a hydrogen ion from solution. So hydrochloric acid breaks down and it releases a hydrogen ion. Sodium hydroxide, which is a base, the hydroxyl ion and the proton will come together and form water. So bases usually have a bunch of OH groups, and acids usually have an H in them. Now there are a few bases that don't have an OH, things like bicarbonate and ammonium. but they will accept a hydrogen. So you can make that NH4, and you can add an H there, and that becomes H2CO3. So they both accept a hydrogen ion in their bases. When we talk about an acid solution, that means it's got a lot of hydrogen. So the more H's you have, the more acid it is. An alkaline solution, that's just another word for base or basic. The more alkaline or basic a solution is, that means the more hydroxyl ions it has. So as the number of H's goes down, the number of OH's goes up, and that means it's more alkaline. And we talk about that in using the pH scale. And all pH is a measure of the number of hydrogen ions in a solution. So I've got a picture, you'll hang on, but pH basically goes from 1 to 14, with 7 being neutral, and water is neutral at 7. It has an equal number of H's and OH's. So H2O breaks down to H plus OH, equal number, there's one H, there's one OH, so it's neutral. Here's your pH scale. So some common, a lot of times people don't realize how many acids and bases we're exposed to. This is just some common acids and bases. Hydrochloric acid, we actually have that in our, as our stomach. Lemon juice, wine, coffee, all these are acid. That means they are, have more H's. Egg white, bleach, ammonia, those are all basic. That means they have more OH's, which is a negative, and so more OH's and less H's. Notice blood. Blood is 7.4, so it's a little alkaline, it's a little basic. It's not completely neutral. It has a little bit of the alkaline or basic. Has more, a few more OH's than it does H's. It's more basic than water. All right, when we talk about acids, again, the more H's you have, the lower the pH. Okay, so make sure you understand that. So an acidic pH has a whole lot of H's, but a low number. Okay, so the more H's you get, the lower the pH gets. So the more the H's, the lower the pH number. An alkaline solution, the fewer the H's, so H's are going down, but the number is going up. Fewer H's, fewer hydrogen ions in solution, the higher the pH. It's very important in homeostasis. You want to keep your pH really stable. Your cells function best at a pH of about 7.4. Any change in pH can be fatal. When we talk about this later on in the semester in 202, you'll find that your kidneys and your lung and some buffers in your blood actually help you to regulate your blood pH. And you may not realize that we kind of do this on our own, especially you guys that have like heartburn. What that means is you've got too much acid in your stomach, and you maybe have reflux. It may be coming up into the esophagus and damaging the tissue. So you take an antacid. So that's like an antacid. Well, that's a base. Okay. So basically, if you have when you take that antacid, you're buffering. You're basically neutralizing the acid. So if you have hydrochloric acid in your stomach and you take a Tums, basically that's a base, and it neutralizes the acid or buffers the acid so it doesn't eat away your esophagus anymore. And so we know we can do that taking a Tums. Our body does that. It does that on its own. It has a natural Tums basically inside your body that allows you to buffer your pH. And we'll talk about that more as we go along. Normal blood pH is somewhere between 7.35 and 7.45. If your blood pH drops below 7.35, it's acidotic. If it rises above 7.45, we call that alkalosis. And those are physiologic conditions that need to be treated. They can be fatal. Sometimes it's due to something that you're doing. For example, if you start to hyperventilate or breathe too fast, then you're breathing off too much CO2. And when you breathe off too much CO2, your pH will go up because CO2 is carried in the blood as carbonic acid. That keeps your pH, kind of keeps your pH from rising too high. When you blow off that CO2, you get rid of that carbonic acid, so now your blood becomes more basic. If you're breathing too slow, hypoventilating, you're not getting rid of carbonic acid fast enough, so you've got a buildup of carbonic acid in your body, so your blood becomes more acidotic. So you can actually change your blood pH by breathing fast or breathing slow. You can also change your blood pH if you get sick. So think about if you throw up too much and throwing up all that hydrochloric acid, getting rid of that. That can mess up your pH. We're not going into a lot of detail now. We'll talk about that later. Buffers. Buffers are basically things that resist changes in pH. They basically try to neutralize acids and bases. For example, like I said, taking a Tums to neutralize your stomach acid. We have buffers in our body that help us keep the acids from being too acidic and the buffers from being too basic. Again, we're going to go into all that later, but that's what a buffer is. It basically neutralizes acids and bases. Let's see. Okay. If you want to learn more about that, and we will as we go along, there's a stealth study in your MyAMP place run under Mastering. It's really neat. It has a lot of information on fluid electrolytes. We'll, again, touch on it a bit in 201, but you'll use it a lot in 202. And in the nursing school, for some reason, acid-base balance always trips up the nursing students. And they always come back because we cover it in 202, and then they forget. And so you will learn it, especially in 202. If you're having trouble with it, come ask me, because like I said, it's one of those things where people learn it the first time, then they forget, they get to nursing school, they can't remember it. And so about that, we know when the nursing school is doing acid-base because all our students come back and we give them a review on how that works. So if you want to kind of get ahead of the game, go ahead and look at, I think, chapter 24 or maybe chapter 26 and start looking at that. Again, you'll get a good overview of it in 202 as well. Okay. So that was the inorganic compounds, all that stuff without carbon. Let's talk about the organic compounds. These have carbon except for carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, and they're unique to living systems. Basically, to be alive is to have carbon. Okay? We have carbohydrates, which are sugars, lipids are fats, proteins, nucleic acids. And most of these are what we call polymers, which means they're chains of similar things. Sugars, a lot of times, are lots of small sugars put together called polysaccharides. Proteins are just chains of amino acids put together. So they're usually big molecules made up of smaller molecules, or compounds made up of smaller compounds. Carbohydrates are sugars. They always contain a carbon, a hydrogen, and an oxygen, some combination of that. And we classify them as either monosaccharides, disaccharides, or polysaccharides. And that just means a monosaccharide is just an individual sugar. It's either a 6-sided structure or a 5-sided structure. And some common ones are glucose, fructose, ribose. Those are simple monosaccharides. If you put two sugars together, like glucose and fructose, you get sucrose, which is a disaccharide. And if you put a bunch of glucoses together, hook them all together, it's a polysaccharide. And that's what glycogen is. I'll go back. Why do we have sugars? Their function, that's our fuel, okay? In order for us to function, we have to have fuel and we have to have glucose. Glucose is what you have to have plus oxygen to get ATP. ATP. I'm getting tired, guys. This is my third lecture today. ATP. So this is what we actually use for energy, but to get ATP, you've got to have glucose plus oxygen. And you know that, like right now, I'm tired. I would really like to go get a candy bar, get some quick energy, get some sugar into my blood so I can make some ATP so I can keep going. It's also a structural molecule. It's part of DNA and RNA. You do use sugars in your building of your DNA and RNA. Okay, lipids, those are your fats. They also contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, but they also contain phosphorus. And the fats are not soluble in water, and you know that. Oil floats on water, so you guys already know that. So the fats don't dissolve in water. Carbohydrates do, you know that, because you can make sweet tea out of sugars. So fats don't dissolve in water, and they come in several different types. You have neutral fats, triglycerides, phospholipids, and steroids. I don't want you to learn the structure. I've got the structures on here, but you're not responsible for being able to draw out what a triglyceride looks like, or a phospholipid, or a steroid. I want you to know what they do. Your triglycerides are your neutral fats, and these are the fats we use for storing energy. You know, your belly fat, insulation, and protection. So the fat that you think of when you're gaining weight and you're getting fat, those are basically triglycerides. Those fats can come as either saturated or unsaturated fatty acids. So your saturated are your solid fats like butter and lard, and your unsaturated fats are like your plant oils like olive oil. So which one do you think is healthier in your diet? Which one do you think would turn your blood to sludge, and which one would just slip on through? Exactly. So your unsaturated typically be more heart healthy. They tend to not clog your arteries, versus saturated fats, which tend to clog up. Just kind of a little FYI, when you go to the grocery store, check for unsaturated fats instead of saturated fats. Okay, steroids. Steroids is your type of hormone, and they're also a type of fat. And it's important to know that steroids are a type of fat, because when you talk about hormones, you're going to talk about solubility, how hormones cross the membrane, how hormones get to where they're going. And knowing whether or not it's a fat or not, or steroid is a fat or not, kind of helps you know what it can do. So we talked about how fat and water don't mix. So when you have steroid hormones that are fat-based, that changes how we can use them. So that's why I want you to know that steroids are a type of fat. When we go into steroid hormones and how they work, you can think like, oh yeah, they're a type of fat. That's why they don't just dissolve in the water like other hormones do, okay? Okay, so we've talked about carbohydrates, we've talked about lipids. These are your proteins. And proteins are made out of, they're polymers, they're long chains of amino acids. There's 20 types of amino acids. Don't got to know them, just know that there's a bunch of them. And they're bonded together, and they have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, sometimes sulfur, sometimes phosphorus, not potassium, not sodium. That's sulfur and phosphorus. So this is an example of some of the amino acids: glycine, aspartic acid, lysine, cysteine. There's homocysteine. There's a bunch of them. You don't have to know those. But they all look a little different, and they all bond together. And when they bond together, they make a polypeptide chain. And proteins have shape. So, and the shape of the protein basically tells you what it does. It tells you its structure, its shape gives it its structure, and it helps give it its function. And so if you read that a protein has a primary structure, that just means it's in a straight chain. Okay, it's just a long straight chain of amino acids. If that chain starts to twist and form a helix, or they line up in sheets, that's a secondary structure. If you take a secondary structure and then twist it on itself, so like I say, this is primary, you twist it to secondary, then twist it again, that's tertiary. All right, and these are big proteins. These big tertiary structures are big proteins. And they typically are things that will carry things. They will carry things. They're transporters. And if you take a bunch of tertiary proteins and stick them together, you get a quaternary. So this is two tertiaries put together, making a quaternary. And quaternary structures are really big proteins, and they almost always carry something. An example of that would be hemoglobin in your blood. And hemoglobin is a really big round globular protein that carries iron, and iron binds oxygen, and that's how you carry oxygen throughout your body. If you've ever left a piece of iron outside and it turns red, that's oxygen oxidizing it, because oxygen and iron bind. Rust, that's why your blood is red. Basically, that oxygen and iron are reacting, and you get that red rusty color. Okay, so some examples of these big proteins are things like keratin, elastin, collagen. Keratin is what makes your nails, hair and nails. Elastin and collagen allows your skin to be, supple and smooth. You have proteins in your muscles that will contract. You have the big globular or round proteins, again, like hemoglobin. A lot of times those things are antibodies, which we use to fight off infection. A lot of times they're hormones, which are part of your endocrine system. Sometimes they're enzymes, which is a biological catalyst. So you get the picture. Proteins are not just, don't think just what we eat protein is meat. It's just not meat, okay? Proteins are used all over the body. I'm not going to go back over enzymes because I covered that in chemistry earlier, but remember, an enzyme is just a biological catalyst. It makes a reaction go faster, okay? It speeds up a reaction. There is a video by Meg Graham on enzymes. It's an excellent video. I would recommend that you watch it. A lot more detail on enzymes. That's all I'm going to cover on it today. So basically, here's a reaction. It takes this much energy. It's really hard for a reaction to get going without an enzyme. If you add an enzyme, the reaction goes faster. So I talked about it earlier. Think about lipase. If you put fat in your body, it takes forever to break down. You add the enzyme lipase, the fat breaks down. So it just speeds up the reaction. Nucleic acids, that's DNA and RNA, and those are the largest molecules in the body. They have carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, phosphorus. This is your DNA and RNA. This is your genes, okay? And they're made up of a nucleotide, I'll show you that, a base, a sugar, and a phosphate. So you have here's your phosphate, your sugar, and your nucleotide. When you talk about DNA and RNA, they have different bases. Not the nucleotide, sorry, base, your base. They have different bases. DNA uses adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. RNA uses uracil, and I'll show you that. DNA is always double-stranded, and RNA is single-stranded. So again, adenine, guanine, cytosine, uracil instead of thymine. DNA, that is, again, this is your genes. It's the code, it's your genetic code. Okay? It's the instructions for building your proteins. When a cell divides, you have to copy your DNA. This is your chromosomes, all that stuff that sounds genetic, that's in your DNA, okay? Your RNA, it's single-stranded. I don't think I have a picture of it, sorry. It's single-stranded, so it looks kind of like the DNA, just one strand. But it's not the code. It doesn't code for your proteins. It's actually involved in making the proteins, or the protein synthesis. And RNA is classified as mRNA, or messenger RNA, transfer RNA, or tRNA, or ribosomal RNA, or rRNA. And in Chapter 3, when we talk about cell biology, we'll go into more detail on DNA and RNA. Right now, you just need to know that they're the largest nucleic acids, largest molecules or compounds in the body. All right, last but not least, one of the most important compounds, ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And it is what we use, it's the energy. That's the energy that our cells use for work. And the only way to make ATP is to break down glucose. And the way you break down glucose, you have to have glucose and you have to have oxygen. And that's in a process called cellular respiration. Again, I'm not going to cover cellular respiration too much. I'll cover it a little bit in Chapter 3, but you do kind of need to know about it. This is one of those things where you guys kind of already supposed to know about cellular respiration, and you probably don't. So if you don't know about it, if you don't know about the Krebs cycle or glycolysis or how glucose turns into ATP, again, there's a video by Meg Graham inside your Blackboard shell. That's a great little video, kind of sums up everything there is to know about how to make ATP. And that's called cellular respiration. So don't get that confused. Cellular respiration and mechanical respiration are not the same thing. Okay? Mechanical respiration is how we breathe, is how we exchange gases. Cellular respiration is how glucose is converted into ATP. Okay, so that's two different things. So don't get the two confused. Cells don't breathe. They're not exchanging carbon dioxide and oxygen. Okay, that's not what cellular respiration is. It's how to make ATP. Again, if that's not something that you're familiar with, you don't remember it from high school biology, go back and watch that video and kind of understand how that happens. The take-home message on cellular respiration, the take-home message is that 1 glucose in the presence of oxygen will give you 36 ATPs. It's a very efficient way for us to convert sugar into a usable form of energy. What is ATP? Basically, you have adenine, you have that base, you have the sugar, and you have some phosphate groups. Okay? ATP has triphosphate, it has 3 phosphates. Whoops, what happened? Has 3 phosphates. Diphosphate has 2 phosphates, and adenine monophosphate, AMP, has 1 phosphate. And so that's how it's named. So if it's ATP 3, diphosphate 2, mono 1. All right, that's all I'm going to say about chemistry. I know it's a lot, but it's a whole lot less than 16 courses in chemistry that you would do if you were a biology major, a chemistry major. So hopefully, if you have any questions, look at your study guide. It'll give you a guide of what you need to know. If you look on your Blackboard, I've basically pulled out some questions from Chapter 2 that I expect you to know. That's a great way to know if you're ready for the exam. And my MP place, the mastering. Chapter 2, the mastering questions, see if you can answer those, and that'll test you and see if you're ready to take that part of the exam on chemistry. All right, guys, that's it. I will see you in class. Have a good day.